Let's discuss about definition of ready. Before we get into the detail of a term definition of ready, we need to understand the context and the utility of this tool called definition of ready. You might be already aware that in the agile world, we keep talking about something called product backlog. So, what is a product backlog? This is a place where we are keeping things, whatever we want to work in our product, we want to add it here. Some items are large, some items are expected to be small. Now, this is something you know that okay, we are focusing on something called product backlog. Now, you might be also aware that in the agile world, we do our development in the time boxed iterations. Say, as an example, we can say that we are working on 2-week time box of a duration. And in this time box, we want to produce a evaluatable, usable, a product deliverable, many times also called increment. So, we have a product backlog, we want to produce something at the end of a 2 weeks as an iteration, as a usable increment of a delivery. Now, what all can be done in a given iteration, we need to find that out. So, there will be a section or the high priority items which are coming on the top of the product backlog item, you as a development team want to pick up for your given iteration. And for that you do an iteration planning meeting here. Now, many times, now let us talk about the problem which we may face. In the iteration planning meeting, if you are facing a problem where you get few ideas which are coming from product backlog, but those ideas are very vaguely defined. Because we are agile, we want them to be progressively defined, but they are little bit too vague. And because of that vagueness, you are unable to make a predictable, committable plan for these 2 iterations, and many times you face a situation where you cannot finish most of the items which you are picking up for a given time box. So, you pick say 4 items, you end up only doing 2 items. And now you as a team started discussing it, how can we improve this situation? How can we have a better understanding of the items which we are planning in a given iteration? Now, it has a multiple aspect because the refinement and elaboration of these items might be done by the different group, and that group might involve stakeholders also, and later on your development team may also come into the picture, but there is a multi-stage refinement is happening. So, we need to set up our expectation. We need to have an agreement which communicates that as a development team, what all information we seek in the items which are expected to get done in the upcoming iteration. And we can say, can we ensure the items which you are giving us are ready? If they are not ready, we may have a difficulty in ensuring that we can really finish it by the end of an iteration. It's a small duration, 2 weeks time, a lot of variability may not be able to challenge or control in that much small time. So, we want to have that particular agreement. So, the definition of ready, you can say, is something help us in defining what is that ready. Because see, ready for your team A and for a team B might differ. A team A might take care of various things during the iteration itself, whereas the other team may want lot of information given in the iteration planning meeting itself so that they can have a committable plan. So, when you are running a process called a backlog refinement, where the team is also involved, but there could be other stakeholders are also involved, and they are finding out what are the new requirements need to be added and which are the requirements we want to be worked upon in the upcoming iteration itself. Not necessarily all the items, but the one which we want them, we may need to ensure that we are meeting the readiness. So, there could be many ideas which needs to be refined in a sufficient detail so that we can make them ready, so they are workable, plannable in our iteration planning meeting. Now, you may say, what could be the example? What are the things possibly go into definition of ready? Again, these are just examples. I am not saying that this is called definition of ready. Why? Because the project team context may change. Something is needed in the another team may not be needed for your team. So, some of the examples of definition of ready could be the item should be small enough. So, you can say the size should be small, which means the items which are expected to get done in the upcoming iteration should be small enough so they get done in the upcoming iteration. You can relate it with the invest criteria of user story also. We are saying it should be size in the small manner. You may have a things like acceptance criterias are added. You may say that okay, whatever items, not all the items in the product backlog, whatever the items we expect get discussed in the iteration planning meeting, for those user stories, for those items, we need to have an acceptance criteria added. So, in this case you can say my definition of ready is saying that we should have a size in a small, and we are saying acceptance criteria should be added. There could be other things like test data should be prepared. Yeah. So, do we have a test data attached to those user story? You may have dependencies are resolved. So, you may want to have a situation where you only want to work on those items in order to ensure predictability where dependencies are resolved. You may have a things where UI wireframes are also expected to be ready. So, these are the kind of things which can help us in developing an understanding between the stakeholder, the people who are working on backlog refinement and doing preparatory work for the upcoming iteration, and the team which is expected to implement this work in the upcoming time box of the iteration. We can say these are the things, kind of things you should be ready with, so that we can have a better understanding of those given items. Now, many times the definition of ready is also understood as an entry criteria. So, the idea here is there is some kind of relevance or kind of overlapping between understanding entry criteria and definition of ready, but there are some differences as well. So, we should not treat it definition of ready as a contract or as a bureaucracy. If it is not ready, I will reject it. Yeah, so team should not say that okay, if you bring something which is not ready, we will not consider it for a given iteration. Then it becomes like a hands off, then it becomes like a bureaucracy. But we want to have it in order to achieve a better commitment for our upcoming iteration, we want the product backlog items ready. In some cases, if there is a high priority item and because of whatever reason the team, when they were doing backlog refinement, they could not make the item ready, you may want to still plan those items in your iteration planning meeting even if they are not ready, because it is all about collaboration. When you are planning the items which are not ready, you have a risk, things may go wrong here, and you may want to mitigate those risks by way of planning less thing during that iteration, or might be having an agreement that yeah, there is a high probability of going things wrong because we are picking the items which were not ready. So, it is all about communicating the expectation to the group who is doing backlog refinement, and also working with the expectation of those people who are doing the development, having some agreement, and also figuring out if the agreement is not getting met, what could be the consequences of working on that particular item. So, that is the input related to entry criteria and definition of ready. I also find people asking what is the difference between definition of ready and acceptance criteria. So, you might have got the idea already, but I am still clarifying. If I have a multiple items here, or these 4 items, they will have their own acceptance criteria. So, definition of ready is not including the acceptance criteria of all the 4 items. What we are saying is the items should have an acceptance criteria. So, definition of ready is a little generic understanding. Oh, whatever we plan, they should be small. Yeah, whatever we talk about, they should have an acceptance criteria. Whatever we do, we should have a test data. But it is not the acceptance criteria itself, it is not the text data on its own, because those things are relevant and linked with each item which we are working on. Yeah. So, we are not defining specific details for any product backlog item in the definition of ready, rather we are defining the generic understanding, generic criteria which makes our development team to plan the work in a better way. Another questions many times comes from the people who are learning definition of ready. Is it fixed? Do we need to make a definition of ready per iteration, or like what is the process? When do we make it? So, the idea is it is something which you made to improve your work. If your work and commitments are getting met, then it is working. If they are not getting met, then you can change it. So, it is a process, it is something which you discuss in your retrospective meeting. So, if you have too many items in a definition of ready, then you might be facing a situation that a lot of pre-work is needed and we have a less flexibility during the iteration. The work is becoming less and less negotiable during the iteration if you define too many things in a definition of ready. If you have too less things in a definition of ready, then you may have a situation where you reach to a space where things are getting planned but not getting completed. So we need to find the balance. And that balance has to be discussed in the retrospective meeting. Whenever you face a situation where that balance is not getting working or helping you, you need to change the definition of ready. And when you change it, it is changed for the rest of the work, and it revises the understanding so that people who are doing backlog refinement can also take the new understanding, and it is primarily for our own working level agreement. So team should do it with the help of the people who are doing backlog refinement, the changes whenever they need in the definition of ready. So these are the few things which can help you in understanding, I believe, something called definition of ready.